So first is before we will start, we need to know what are learning outcomes. So on completion of this lesson, the students should be able to first, you can discuss the main ideas of object-oriented programming, namely abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Those are the four areas of or principles or concept of object-oriented programming that we're going to uh, look into for the entire semester. Next is identify the parts of class and object. So as what Baldemar read us about the meaning of object-oriented programming, we have he mentioned about classes and objects. So right now we can identify the parts of a class and of an object. Okay, then able to construct objects through classes. You can able to create a object using classes and focus the importance of object-oriented programming. Okay, so those are the four objectives that we are going to target. Once we have finished our lesson, we are able to do that the following. Okay, so let me start about programming. Okay, so you all know what is programming. Since first year until now, programming is the common thing to do as an IT. So let me ask you, have you already understand really what is programming? Did you already know what is the purpose and the concept of programming? Because you already create a program and then you all have all the emotions that you have already gathered just to finish that program. So, did you already grasp the concept of programming? Any idea from the group or from the class could give the insight, your insight? What is programming? Any representative? Okay, so wala. Okay, let me know. Okay, let me see. Okay. How about uh okay, Ligara. What's man? Gabulang pag attendance di ay. Sorry for disturbing you. Okay, nada sa chat section dai ang attendance. Salan ko di ay na. Okay, Manila. Okay, help Ligara. Okay, very good. Very well said, Miss Manila. Okay, so ina to, no? Set of instructions that to give to the computer. Now, giving instructions to the computer, it's not easy thing to do, right? Because you have set of standards for the languages. We have to memorize the syntax. We have to memorize how the program or how the syntax works. Okay. Then also we have to provide our algorithm. Okay. So building programming is the process of building a software. Okay. It's just programming. In my illustration, programming is just building a house. The one that you already you can see my presentation, right? So in my presentation you can have you can see um, a house. So that is a finished product of carpentry. Okay, so carpentry and programming is the same. Okay, so once you can see an application or program that can be used, that is the finished product of programming. So that house is a finished product of carpentry. Okay, first thing you're going to consider in the carpentry is to memorize. If you are a carpenter, you are going to memorize and know the tools needed for carpentry. right? You cannot create a house without knowing how to use the handsaw, how to use the G-clamp, how to use the tri-square, the measure tape, the hammer, the handrail, the chisel. So those are the tools that you're going to use in carpentry. So in order to become a good carpenter, you are going to memorize and always practice using those tools. Okay? Now, once you've memorized the tools, the usage, next thing you're going to do is the planning. Now, how you are going to build that particular house. You have now the tools, you have now the skills that you are going to use that tools and skills for building a house. Right now, all you need to do is the plan. Unsay porma ng house, what unsay iyang unsay iyang oh yeah, the design, the plan, and whatsoever you are going to plan it. Okay? So without if you have the tools and you don't have the plan also, you cannot um, produce a good output. So you should use together the tools that you are needed. You know how to use the tool, and also you are going to plan it. Okay, so in my illustration I use carpentry and the house as uh, an illustration of what is programming. Okay, because all of you knows what is um, carpentry. Friend mom. So um, so right now, so programming, as Manila says, diba? So it is the application. So you're giving instructions to the computer what to do. So like for example, there is an if on the screen you can see a lot of applications that are now available in the web or the application store. So you can have, for example, the clock. You have set the instruction how you're going to how the computer knows what is the time for today, diba? You can set an alarms. You can do whatsoever on the clock, and then we have all the photos, messaging. So those are the particular. There are set of instructions how it's being made. Okay, so this is an application. For example, a series of a lot of applications available. Okay, so these are the programming constructs, the tools that we used, diba? In programming. So we need to learn the data types, the conditional statement, the if else switch statements, the looping while, do while. So those are the tools that we are needed in order to develop an application. Regardless of what programming language that we are going to use, it's up to us, but this is the programming constructs, the basic constructs that we need as a programmer to memorize, to understand, and to know how to use it, where to use it, and when to use it. Because if you don't know this one, you cannot create an application this for a particular application. So you need to learn those programming constructs that we review last semester, diba? So you always familiarize, you always practice. In programming, you cannot um you cannot learn unless you try. Always try. And it's just like riding a bike. You cannot be a good rider if you only try it once. You always ride a bike until you know that you are good enough to ride a bike. So it's just the same in programming. You cannot become a programmer if you just once create a program. So not once, not twice, but always to practice your skills. If you have now already the skills and the tools that needed to create a application, next thing you're going to do is algorithm. Okay, you have to set and instructions to the computer. You are now giving instructions to the computer. Since you know already the tools that you need to understand how the computer read or interpret your codes. Now you have now the algorithm, step-by-step procedure, and how in particular uh, task that the computer to be made. So you add algorithm. So you have now the algorithm, the idea of algorithm, and your skills in having an algorithm. So plus the tools that you have learned, so you are now a good programmer. So the same. So always, because you cannot create an application without the plan. So you have to plan it. What are the first step, the second step, what are the data needed, everything. So you have that algorithm. Okay? So any questions? Anan. So thank you. So let me proceed to the next slide. Okay, which is the programming paradigm. So we all know, you know, na there are different kinds of languages available, okay, in programming. But before that, we need to understand that there are kinds of programming. Okay, so basically there are two major kinds of programming or types of programming. How we program. So we have imperative programming paradigm and declarative programming paradigm. So we don't need to concentrate about declarative programming paradigm because we will just focus on imperative programming paradigm because in imperative we are you already familiar with procedural programming, then our topic for this school year is object oriented programming. So we don't need that this one declarative programming paradigm. So I will just show you that there are types of programs how we program. Okay, so the most common is imperative programming paradigm. So dito nagsugod. Okay. So, procedural programming is a kind of programming paradigm which concerns only on a series of instructions. So, you will just it's just to write a piece of codes from top to bottom, left to right, not knowing if that is secured, what if that is the data is being or the steps are being repeated. So wala na siya concern. As long as the program works and running, you have used procedural programming. Okay, so right now we have object-oriented programming that we are going to learn. Diba? So why imperative programming? Because imperative programming deals with data structures, we have data types, and we have algorithms. So um, that is why we tend to use procedural and object-oriented programming as a tool for us as a programmer. Kani siya mga logic programming, mga functional programming, which is uh, more on databases. So, di lang nato siya gigamit. Gigamit na siya ni sa ubang subjects but not in some programming. Okay, so let's go deeper comparing two paradigms, which is procedural programming and object-oriented programming. Okay, so in the diagram, we have procedural-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. So we have global data. Okay, so every program, there should be two distinct parties. We have the data that being gathered and being processed, and the function, or which is the steps or the process. So do gina imong balantayan mo na sa ka program na i-data na gi-store, gi-manipulate, yung naa po siya certain processes. So that is why we have global data and then function. So data are those things that the program needs to process, di ba? Unsa may makinala nimo like outputting your name, should the computer outputs your name, so name is your data. But the process is the output. So what is the function? That is the function. So every program has we called it uh, two parts or parts. So we have part one. The part one is the data, and the part two is the process. Okay. So in procedural programming, as you can see, we have global data that's being declared throughout the program. That global data can be accessed through all functions, okay, and through all functions. And every function has its own local data. So to understand really the concept of this, let me give you an illustration. Okay, so Negros Oriental is a province. Okay, so consisting how many municipalities and cities, no? So Negros Oriental has a governor to rule the entire province of Negros Oriental. So a governor can be classified as a global data because of its jurisdiction from whatever municipality, barangay, sitio in Negros Oriental, his sovereignty, his power can reach out on that particular location. So that is what we call term is global data. All the functions can all the data declared on that particular um, file can be accessed to that on that function. So si governor nara sa Dumaguete or whatsoever, but the power he has will reach into whatever city or whatever barangay you are in right now. So that is the global data. Okay. Now when you say local data, so every function has a local data. So the local data for function one have or doesn't or don't have we call it the capacity to change or what you call it to share information for different functions. So meaning there are dependent. So meaning the local data here is only intended for function 1. The local data here is intended for function 2, and the local data here is also functioned by function 3. So those local data in each function, it is not reachable. Okay, so for example, okay, Negros Oriental has three district. District 1 from Manhuyo or Bais to Canlaon. We have District 2 is from Tanhay to Dumaguete, Mansikuruna, and then we have District 3 which is on the south. So every district has its own congressman, right? So every congressman has its own jurisdiction. So, ug congressman ka sa District 1, wala kay labot sa District 2. So, your power is only on the District 1. Okay? Are you with me? Nasabtan ra ninyo? Okay, so that means this is the what we're talking about the local data on procedural programming. So, the local data here is no longer accessible to the local data on function 2 and function 3. Okay, so that leads to trouble when we are creating large application because some large application there are some data that are reusable, there are can be accessible to some parts of the application. So what happened if you have data here on function 1 that is similar to function 2, what you are going to do is to rewrite it again on function 2 in order to get similar data on function 1. Now the problem, if you're going to write again the process and the function of function 2 the same to function 1, it will make your line of codes much more larger. Kaya mura naman siya og redundant. Imo man siyang isuhid lang into codes. So if the code's much more larger and manier, what happened? Your file size will be bigger, and the process of the program should takes time. We don't want applications that are slow to pick up or slow to process. Diba? So we want application that's very easy and very convenient to run through. So nakita nila ang problema for procedural programming because along the way, we share data. We share data to every processes. So here, they cannot share data based on the illustration. You can only share data through global data. But as long as local data is concerned, you cannot access it. So that is the number one problem in object on procedural oriented programming. Now, object oriented highlighted and solved that issue by sharing those um, call it data through functions. So you can see in the diagram, this is what we call our first object, second object, and third object. So there are three objects here that's being connected through functions. So here, the data in here can be accessed through functions. Okay, data here can access also through functions. So what happened? You can access data through functions to functions, and you solve redundancy, and you use reusability of codes. If you have data here that are needed on in this function, all you need to do is just to gather that data and work it on here. You don't need to rewrite. You don't need to recode. All you need to do is to use this object into this, and that's it. You save time. You save um, you save many line of codes. So that is the very best um, short comparison of procedural and OOP. So the OOP will give us a chance to reuse codes and to minimize our line of codes. Another thing that OOP gives us is we call it the security, because objects are encapsulated, meaning it's hidden, it's being hid from the real world. So as you can see in the diagram of OOP, data and functions are being stored in somewhat like box. Okay, so unlike for procedural programming that it is open. Okay, as you can see also, functions are, even though they have separate objects, but every functions of the objects are being connected if you want to, di ba? In here, this should be a main program that has connections with every functions, and what happens if this function breaks, if function 2 breaks, the function 5 will never will not work. That is the problem for procedural. As you can see here, there are interdependence. If this one is not working, they can also use this function. Okay? So, sa parehas. Dira. Any questions so far, guys? None ba? So, this is your chance to ask questions. Okay, so wala na questions. Maulaw lang mga tana. Okay. Or mga tana na yung mga tana. Okay, wala na daw. Okay, so you know the difference between procedural and OOP. So now, why object-oriented? Okay? Okay, as you can see, that is an airplane, right? That is a car. Okay, kisa may wala nangandoy og Ford Everest, di ba? Kitang tanan nangandoy ana maka car. We can have a bike, have a ball, we can have human. Those are objects, right? In the real world, this is objects. This is object. Airplane is an object because we can touch everything we can touch is an object, right? You can touch that plane. I never touch a plane pa in my entire life. Siguro ang uban nakakuha na. A car been been touched but never owned. Bike, sige, nakatouch na tag bike. At crawball, ikatouch na punta. Human, we can touch human. Right now, we cannot touch our classmates and we really miss them, di ba? Lahi ra itong suwiranay sa personal kaysa pa suwiranay sa GC lang. And a tree is an object we can touch. Now, can you see what is common to each object? Anybody can see common touch, sense of touch. That is common. Yeah, we can touch all the objects. Another common as a purpose. We can change that term into object has its own behavior. Di ba? The behavior of a plane is to fly. The behavior of a car is suman, to accelerate, di ba? A behavior, okay, a human has its own behavior. That's why behavior ang gina proper term. Kay lahi man ang human og nakatbutang tag purpose, lahi man yang purpose. Like for example, yung purpose is to become a great man. So yan, may man yung mga purpose. So to be exact, we have behavior, something objects can do. That is behavior. Okay, another thing, another common through objects. We have na behavior. We only have two. Only one na lang ikulang. Anybody here can give the other common. Yeah, makita na to. Oh, we can see, but we cannot touch, or we cannot touch, we cannot see. Okay, we can see. Okay, that's correct. But there is we can see what the characteristic. Okay, the characteristics, the color, the size, the we call it um, the height, the weight, the diameter. Those are the things that we see. Okay, so the characteristics. So the common. So what is common? Common are the characteristics and behavior. Every objects in the real world has its own characteristics and behavior. Okay, like for this one, this plane has its own characteristics, di ba? I told you. A size, the color, the capacity, what is the engine, what is the height, what is the weight, the model, the brand. Are all these characteristics can describe this plane. So these are the characteristics. Now this is now the behavior. What this object do. So that can start engine, brake, take off, landing. These are the things that this plane can do. That is the behavior. So every object can have these characteristics. It depends on what objects that you are going to to work with, but there are some characteristics that can be found out in here. So um, you can tell what are those characteristics. So there are some are obvious, there are some that merely not obvious. So are you agree with me that these are the two? So can you add something in there for the characteristics of the plane and the behavior? Okay, can you give me? Walay makagib. Amardi. Natulog man siguro ni sila. Who can add some putol-putol akong tingog. Sorry for that. Uh, who can add some characteristics of the plane? Yeah, the quality of the plane. Then there are some we call it the we call it some the category of the plane na business plane, na ay private plane, di ba? Na ay, di ba there are kinds of plane. So, pwede kind to that characteristics that describe a particular object. Okay? Another we go to another object like this one. Characteristics of the car. You can have the size. Good. We have the color, which is gray. Capacity, siguro we have 6 seaters or 7 seaters. Engine, I don't know. You can have the engine. Height, what is the height? Weight, the model. Okay, the model is Everest, and we have the brand is Ford. So those are the characteristics that describes that model. So what are the behaviors of that object? So you can start an engine, can brake, accelerate, decelerate, and stop engine. Those are the things. Okay, so who among you here can add some characteristics of the car and also some behavior of the car? Speed. Okay. Okay. Ang imong pong speed, nagdepende po na sa imong engine. So that's good, great. So, speed. Okay. Next, what is another? So, atong speed, asa man tumabot ang ato? That is characteristics or a behavior. So, characteristic was just be for me, speed is okay. Speed is characteristics because we can know what is the maximum speed of this car. So that is that characteristics that describe the car. Kay mukhang speed og imo say behavior, there is accelerate and decelerate of the speed. So for me, I'll take it on the characteristics. Any so we going to proceed to another object for bike. Okay. So they have also a characteristic and behavior. So size, the bike has a size. Okay, a color. So naman nasa size nasa bike na 29er, 27.5, na atay 26. You have color, we can have red, the height, the weight, the model, the brand. Okay. Can somebody add characteristics of the bike? Na naman tayo weight. Oh, always inequality. Okay, napila aside sa quality, durability. Okay, good. Price. That is characteristics. Durability. Pwede po butang na to durability pero okay. Pero going back to your classes in your database, there are some characteristics because characteristics or attributes or fields in your data table. There are some fields that you are going to mention that are needed, and there are some that they're not needed. So those not needed maybe will be not included in order for characterizing a particular object. So katong price is good. How about sumamilain? Ini. The type. Okay, there are some bikes like they have mountain bike, we have eco bike, natay road bike. So there are kinds of bikes. So we can have kinds of bike. So sayang kat e-bike, 'di ba? So inana. So inana siya characteristics. So we go to the behavior. The bike can brake, accelerate, decelerate. Oo. So may laing you can add into that behavior of the bike. If may nakita mo bike, you can let the bike jump, di ba? Or magpaubal-ubal pa ka sa pilain. O magwili-wili ka dito. Oh, uh, no, no saddle, sa pilain. So those are the behavior of the bike siguro. So another thing for takraw ball, you have the size, the color, the height, the weight, the model, the brand, and also the behavior is bounce and roll. So most uncommon, um, okay, they'll have here the human, they'll have the size, the color, the height, the weight, the name, address. So someone can add into that characteristics of that human. Characteristics ata. What are some characteristics? Huh? Dati, ato gengi, attitude. Kasi, behavior, attitude. Ato ta sa behavior. Ato ta sa characteristics. We just fall into characteristics. So what are the characteristics needed? We need to add into that particular uh, set of characteristics of a human. So we have now the size, the color, the height, the weight, the name, address, can have birth date, milain, uh, eye color, blood type, sumilain, hair color, ha- hair ha- hair type, sumilain. O sa mga klase, kanang appearance dako dako kay na siya suligaron sa mga klase kay way angay, batig naong, gwapo, gwapa ana inyo pasabot ang appearance na ay na ay pleasing, na ay unpleasing, ana tawag ana. Ha? Ah, okay, good gender. Kanang characteristics na simple. Going back to your database, di ba? There are usually kani guys, kaning characteristics, as you mentioned, in database more on attributes, more on data to be stored. Those are the things also needed. The same thing in here. So as a human, you have to be picky on what are the characteristics that always describes a human. Okay, intended for also your the needed character data that you need to do. Like for example, katong ganihan ingon mo na appearance. Wala tayo may mo ng appearance. We don't characterize at appearance. So, 'di ba? Usually in in a human conversation, usually moingon yun na siya na moingon siya katubang kuan ba tong itomon nataason, 'di ba? Ano siya asa to, 'di ba? So dagang kay kang confusion. Pero if you cannot do that in a computer. If you talk like that in a computer, kasabihan ka sa computer, you want it computer wants to be specific. Okay, 'di ba? Mingon ka sa enrollment system. Mingon ka na you're a student. Okay, find the students katuganing pution, naniwangon, nakuluton. O sa may isulti sa computer, 'di ba? Mingon din siya na student not found. Because the computer cannot look into that. Oh, pero moingon gani ka sa computer na look into that last name mao na, first name mao na, middle name mao na. Probably the computer will give you that particular student. But again, those data that I've mentioned, last name, second, first name, last name, probably the student can have similar name, last name. So there is a characteristic or a characteristic that is very unique to every character. Unsa man na, di ba sa database, there should be a unique key, a primary key. So, unsa man gito na sa inyong database? Di ba? When you are being asked for the enrollment, your character, characteristic of a student added with one unique ID, which is the student ID. It's always being asked. Why? Because student ID, only one student owns that data. In your student ID, you only own that ID. That means that that ID belongs to you. That is unique to you. You are a unique entity, a unique student. Because name cannot be unique, age cannot be unique. Dagan parehas mo ga 24, 23, 22. That is not unique. Address address that is not unique. That is because you have similar barangays or similar. So what characteristic that makes is that make the student unique? The student ID. The same thing with the employee. What makes the employee unique? That is the employee ID. Okay, di ba? That ID gives you a unique. Like the same as for your cell phone. Your SIM, your we call it subscriber identification module, SIM. SIM, your number is the SIM number. Not all of us has the same SIM number, 'di ba? Kakuyaw naman og naay parehas nimo number. Nakatong usang number ni uyab, nakauyab makakahat noon, 'di ba? Ni text naman ni text naman noon dito na nikaon na ka babe, awa na. Nya ang sendan kay marupok man sad ni reply man noon pod. So daghang makilak ana if SIM number is not unique. Daghang marong send, 'di ba? So that is why all objects should have a unique character. Okay? And some of the character that you mentions are not uh, pwede because of some you should make that object or that object uh, to ani imuha siyang i-describe into the characteristic. So just be picky of what are those characteristics that you are going to include. Okay? So kato mga civil status, that is very important. As a human, civil status, uh, the TIN, the tax identification number, whatsoever. Those are the mga needed characteristic to describe a human. Okay? So, are you with me that every object has its characteristics and behavior? That is why object-oriented programming uses or adapt the object. It is because there are two common things, characteristic and behavior, which is also equivalent to those here that we have already discussed earlier, that characteristics is data and behavior is function. So OOP relies on the concept of real world object. Okay? That all object can be has probably the same data characteristics or data, and we have functions that really want into and imo siyang gamiton to another function. So later on, we will go deeper how we're going to use functions to functions. Uh, we call it reusability of codes. Okay, so any questions that the characteristics? So why OOP? Because OOP follows the real world entity that describing an object. So munang ato siyang siya gamiton sa to ang pag-coding, because coding in OOP relies on data and functions. So, question. Okay, so Manan, so this is the definition of OOP. So object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm, is a way of programming based on the concepts of objects. So based on the concept of objects. So you know why? Why object? Because object may contain data. So when we say data, that is characteristic or attribute or field. So in the form of field. So these are the terminologies that are jumping into. So when you say data, it's either that is characteristic, attribute, or field. So in the form of fields or often known as attributes. And code. So there is a code in the form of procedures of known as methods. So mayroon kang we call it code. So procedures, set of procedures that interact with the computer, or methods. So we have functions or behavior. So muna siya. So based sa ato ganiha na definition na nigiread ni Baldomar, parang wala kay ta idea what is object-oriented programming. Now, we clearly see what is object-oriented programming. So, OP deals with object. So, why object? Because object contains data and procedure. Okay, now these are the four basic principles of OOP. We have abstractions, encapsulations, and inheritance, and polymorphism. Okay, so we go first with abstraction. But before going abstraction, we will dive into what is class. Okay, before that, we cannot create object without a class. That is the prerequisite. So you should create a class before object. So what is really a class? Class. What is really a class? Guys na lang. Okay, what is really a class, guys? It's a template or blueprint that defines a specific complex data type for creating object. So class is a complex data type. So mga data type ka to mga int, long, char, for naman, sorry po. Float, we have boolean. Those are the data types. But class is a complex data type. You can have lots of data inside of that complex data type, which is class. So class is a template or a blueprint. Plano siya, masya plano. So in order to create an object, there is a plan for making an object. Assuming this is this one, you see the arrow that I am pointing, a class. So we have a class car. This is a blueprint. Okay? Kasi blueprint diya, mura siya hulmaan. Kasi ang paghulmaan na siya, yung hulmaan is we have a year, make, model. Now what that is a plano? I have that is a car class car or car class. Now out of the plan, you can create a lot of objects. Create a lot of objects. Lot of like you can have create a car which Camry, car like Camaro, car like Benz, car like Caprice, and Sonata. Those are brands or cars. Okay, so out that are objects. So out of a class, you can create one or more objects based on your template. Like for example, houses. 'Di ba? Houses. Sa tuang panimalay or sa tuang kuan, sa tuang community, there is some atong mga silingan nagpatukod og balay, 'di ba? Tukod og balay, ala, wala nindot lagi ilang plano silang balay. Be ako pod magpagama akong balay parehas ay laha. So sa usa ka plano, you have created two house, 'di ba? So kaya ang Pinoy suyaan ba na, 'di ba? Di ka kita-kita dayon, makita na ang silingan nindot nagbalay, pak panindot po sila balay, 'di ba? So you can have an object to that class. For example, sa mga common ni sa mga during that time of pandemic, people uh, go to kanang nagnegosyo og barbecue. O plano atong usa na magtukod sa barbecuehan. Okay, plano niya. Okay, ha na siya blueprint. Okay, what happened? Pagtukod niya og barbecuehan, 2 to 3 days later, ang atbang na ni barbecuehan pod. Hindi siya wait pod siya. Oh, that is object out of that plan. Out of the plan. Nanapod siya lain na pong ni-adapt sa iyang plan. So that is object. So now, nanapoy usa na pod na barbecuehan. Yung sa unahan na pod na napoy barbecuehan. So what may nagkadaghan ang barbecuehan. So daghan ang object. Okay? Nasabtan ba? What is a class? Okay. Another good example of that is you all of us has a Facebook account, right? We take that example that our is blueprint is the Facebook. Facebook app or facebook.com is the blueprint. No, that is the Facebook. So now, when we log in, when we create an account on Facebook, we hold our account. We hold as an object of that facebook.com. And your account, once you register, I have an account, you have an account, every one of us has a Facebook account. So all our account is an object of the facebook.com. Facebook.com is the class. Out of that class, you created a lot of objects. That is amazingly happens that my account only I only control it, and your account is you only control it. And that is the basic principle of abstraction. Okay, ni fall into that illustration. Na naatay mga objects lain-lain out of one class, you can have created much more objects, but that objects are not connected to one another. I have my Facebook account, I have my settings, I have my post, I have my PMs, everything. You also have your Facebook accounts, you have your PM, you have your posts. Maybe we can interact with if you are friends, but nothing, wala guro na hitabo na mag-post ko diri og something mo post pud sa inyo ha dira, di ba? Gawas ko rong itag. Pero dili man gani itag, di jud mo gawa sa inyo. Ug unsa akong i-post, mora pag i-post sa inyo. That is what we call abstraction. A simple explanation of what is abstraction. As you can see on the diagram, we have a class human. A class human can create 3 objects or more. We have object John, object Jill, and object Jack. So those are the class objects can create in the human class. So there are 3 objects that in they are not connected to each other, like the one like we have on our Facebook account. So we have accounts there, but we are not connected to each other. My account is never your account. So like that one, that is what we call abstraction. Subtan, any question? That is the first principles of no. Also man, nasabtan ra ba or wala? Sabtan. Binako. So okay ra. Sige. So that is what we're going what is class and what is object, and also we apply also it an abstraction. Next thing is we have here, okay, encapsulation. Okay, encapsulation, just think about like kasi nakita og kani si a medicine like katong nasa capsule like uh, amoxicillin sumatoning sumalain na loperamide, sumalain mga inana. Ito mga inana mga porong uh, ansa? Sumalain. Those are capsule, di ba? So when you open the capsule, there are some substances there. That is the medicine. Pero when you take that medicine, you need to take also the capsules. You don't need to see the substance inside the medicine. Okay, that is also that think OOP has its own encapsulation. In the encapsulation, the variables, the data, and the methods or the behavior of that class will be inside of that capsule. Ay, ma'am. So, nakas-capsule na siya. Okay ra, ma'am, oy. Ang imong class, nasulod siya sa capsule. So, whatever the data and the behavior of a class, the other class cannot see it unless you do so setting it to another setting. So, ngayon naka-nindot sa encapsulation because the wrapping of data and function together into a single unit is called encapsulation. This feature keeps the data safe from outside interference and misuse. This leads to concept of data hiding. So, gi-hide nimo ang data. Usually right now, prone kayo ang hacking, a cyber attack, we call it, the website is down. So, developing an application is very crucial. You don't have security. Procedural programming lacks that features. That is why some programmers migrate into um, OOP because OOP has its own principle like this that you will hide some entities on on the class. So, imo siyang i-hide sa uban na class. So, it's being safe. Para sa nang nag-inom kag tambal, di ba? You don't even know what inside of that capsule, but you know that that is medicine is for sakit sa ulo or for sakit sa tiyan, di ba? But you don't even know what is inside of that capsule. It's that the same. You know that that class is for human or for car, but you don't even know what is inside of that class, and that is very good because only you, a programmer, knows what is that inside of the class. The other people who are trying to access on your code, it will no longer see that one that mo na siya ihasulod dira. So that's a good advantage also in object-oriented programming. Any question? Wala question, guys? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. So now, we will now proceed to the um, uh, so principle is what we call inheritance. So in a mechanism where you can to derive class from another class for a hierarchy of classes that shares a sets of attributes and methods. This is nindot ni siya. For example, we have a human class. Yeah, you have a human class. So you have a set of attributes there. You have a set of behaviors of a human class. Now, assuming that this dad, we will replace it into a student class. Student class is still a human because student is a human. So you will just inherit all the attributes for the human like name, date of birth, address, gender, contact number, whatsoever. Those are for attributes of the human class. So you don't need to create if this is this that class will be a student class. You don't need to create now name, address, gender. You don't need to rewrite that codes. You all need to do is to inherit whatever in the human class. So all you need to do to make it student class, you add course, year level, scholarship. That makes that class student. So all you only need, instead of writing the bunch of codes, rewriting it, you are just inheriting some codes that you need to and add some data that are required to have on that particular class. You get that point. So, di na ka mo rewrite. That is what we call also reusability. Instead of writing it over and over again, you have a class that human that has name, address, gender, uh, So all we need to do is just to inherit that on the student class, and the student class no longer write that code, but it will directly create at the characters like course, year level, and kuan sumilain um course, year level, and scholarship. So nana. So to make that last student. The other way of the class, mm, we have class employee. For example, human class employee is still human also. So now what we're going to do, the same thing, last name, first name, middle name, or the gender, the date of birth, address, are on the human class. All you will need to do is to inherit it on the employee class. And what makes the employee class to become employee, you put here the department, the salary. Those are the characteristics that needs to on the employee class. So you can save more time, space, line in using inheritance. Na more sa inheritance ko, inherit na ko nimo. For example, 'di ba? For example, you have your father has a straight hair, 'di ba? And your mother has also uh, straight hair. So ikaw, ma-inherit nimo na straight hair pug ka, 'di ba? So unsa man lamay usbon nimo sa imuha, sa imong kaugalingon. So makita gid nimo na ang behavior ni papa nimo maayo. So you inherit the behavior of your father. Ang behavior inherit nimo ang behavior ni mama nimo na maayo, 'di ba? Pero paminaw nimo na okay na something wrong si papa na I don't want to make it in my life, then you can overwrite it. You can also overwrite it in programming. So whatever mechanism we see in our real world, we can also use it in OP. But that is not the inheritance in OP. Any questions about inheritance? Ah, nasabtan lang. Wala na sir kay alas 3 na kapen, di ba? Okay, it's last. Sa man. Sige na lang, okay na lang. Okay raw masalaag. As long as okay, if ever you are kuan ning na masalaag, just go into na lang because of when you leave that one, your activities will be gone. So just stick on it na lang. Okay? Okay, so the last principle that we are going to talk is about polymorphism. One interface, multiple implementations. So polymorphism is an object-oriented programming. It's the ability to create property, a function, or an object that has more than one realization. Okay, so I don't think so that you are go with the definition because time soon we will going to explain it each by each. So ako rang gipasabotin niyo unsa di basic principles and OOP. So kaning polymorphism is just like you are a driver. Di ba? Kabalo ka mo drive og motor. So kung kabalo ka mo drive og motor, okay, kung kabalo ka mo drive og motor, so di na siya kinahanglan what brand kabalo ka mo. So kabalo ka mo drive og motor, so kabalo ka na kabulok. Example, there are three kinds of category of motor man go, di ba? Natay clutching, tong manual, natay semi-manual, naputay automatic, semi-automatic, ni automatic. Automatic itong scooters, yung katong semi-automatic, katong mga XRM, mga Wave, mga katong clutch lang, yung katong manual, katong katong madagkong motor pod. So, so okay, so makes sense na to na we know how to for example ato ra ta siya sa scooter. Kabalo ka mo-drive og scooter, di ba? Na motor. So that means that ang polymorphism is mo inani siya na concept. O kabalo ka mo drive og motor na scooter, tanang scooter na motor kabalo ka mo drive. Mapa-Yamaha pa man na, ma Beat, ma-Honda Beat, ma-Honda Click, gusto man na gusto man na mga Aerox, gusto man na mga kuan na. Kung kabalo ka mo drive og bike, di siya ma-matter on sa brand, di ba? Kay parehas man na siyang scooter, di ba? Kay alangan may yun, drapog ka na. Kabalo ko mo drive og motor, Honda Click. Oh, nausaw na Honda Beat. Na mura man gyapon na sila, scooter man gyapon sila. That is the principle of polymorphism. So meaning, ang imong codes, imong function will ug mo na mo ang paingnan, pwede mapaingnan sa uban tanan. Mani pasabot sa polymorphism. So kung kabalo ka og mo drive og semi-automatic na motor like XRM Wave, sa pamailain na katong mga Smash. So kabalo ka na, whatever the brand it is that you're going to use, you can know how to ride a bike, a motorcycle. Na siya. Kung kabalo ka mo gamit og Raider, XR, yung CRF, ng mga clutching, ng mga motor as manual. So whatever the brand it is, you can ride a bike or a motorcycle. So muna what is the purpose of polymorphism? So any questions about polymorphism? Ako rang i-dive into. Walay problema sa polymorphism. Nasabtan. Okay, actual coding on data. I will teach you how you are going to create a class, and I will create an object for our first lesson. But I guess we don't have any time, so can we meet again on Tuesday for the actual coding? Is it okay with you guys? Okay. Masayon ra man gud sulti-sultion ni sir, pero kaabot og programming na sir, magabot nag coding sir. Lahi na putong istorya. so so actual coding ta on Tuesday. Okay? So any questions? Clarity. Wala. So if you don't have questions, can you turn on your camera so we can. Okay. Okay, turn on your camera for us to document it. Uh, sige lang, sige lang. Uh, sige. For we need to screenshot man good. Sige, I will count 5 to ready to smile. Pag smile na to, hold up for 5 seconds also kay screenshot pa ko. Okay? Ready na ba? Ready na ba tong smile? Ready na ba mga walay ligo diya? Oh? Okay, so ready. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, thank you guys for coming. Already you have attendance tanan? Okay, kung okay na so. Okay, we will meet you on tomorrow naman, Tuesday, next week for our actual coding. Bye-bye everyone. God bless. Aja. Bye-bye, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.